Thomas Paine once said, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again. A situation, similar to the present, hath not happened since the days of Noah until now. The birthday of a new world is at hand, and a race of men, perhaps as numerous as all of Europe contains, are to receive their portion of freedom from the events of a few months." This quote was published in the pamphlet Common Sense. The pamphlet is seen as influential in advocating for the American Revolution. He was explaining that if we were to secede from Great Britain, America would be reborn into a new world, a better world, a world that had not yet been seen. We can also put what he was saying into the context of the fall of the Berlin Wall. People born in the Berlin Wall era felt like they were in a new world, and the United States felt similarly. The fall of the Berlin Wall improved the diplomatic, patriotic, and economic standings of the United States and symbolized the end of the Cold War. The Cold War was a trying time. By 1945, the United States, US, and the Soviet Union, USSR, had begun to emerge as the world's oppressed superpowers. The Cold War started 2 years later in 1947 and lasted from then to 1991, almost 45 years. It reached its peak in 1948 to 1953. It was between the USSR, the US, and the US's respective allies, France and Britain. On August 12, 1961, a concrete and wire wall was built between East and West Berlin. Occupation of Berlin had begun in June 1945, 16 years earlier. By 1952, the border had closed between East and West Germany, even though the wall wasn't built yet. The US, Britain, and France made out West Berlin, while the USSR occupied East Berlin. Berlin sat entirely within Soviet-occupied East Germany. The wall claimed the lives of over 350 people during its 25-year history. In November 1989, East German spokesman Günther Skarbuski said East Germans would be allowed to travel to West Germany, failing to say some regulations would remain. That weekend there was a mass exodus. More than 2 million people from East Berlin visited West Berlin. The Soviet Union existed as a country from 1922 to 1991, and at that time, it was, by area, the world's largest country. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union was the major political party in Russia and the Soviet Union from 1912 to 1991. The Soviet Union was one of the key nations in the Cold War, responsible for the Berlin Wall. The Cold War led to a regression of social reforms in the U.S. After the fall, U.S. citizens were optimistic for Eastern Europe's future since the international capital flows grew from 5% of global GDP to 21%, trade grew 20%. Serge Skiman, a New York Times reporter, said the fall of the Berlin Wall had a profound impact on the U.S.-Russian relations. He says, "It changed the entire map of the world, and it changed mainly our psychology. We all grew up, I certainly did, in a Cold War psychology. There's good guys, bad guys, there's them and us. There are two powers," said Skiman. "If you had Tsar acting up, either they or we would have controlled in the interest of the great competition. So the loss of that has created a dynamic that we've not yet sorted out. The fall of the Berlin Wall improved our way of life. It took the Cold War life, which we had for close to 45 years, and freed us from the clutches of nuclear fallout." After the Berlin Wall fell, many reformations in Europe occurred. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed and 15 newly independent nations were born. Many countries embraced democracy, removing the threat of widespread communism. Germany reunited on October 3, 1990, 11 months after the fall. Diplomatic, patriotic, and economic standings in the United States improved the fall of the Berlin Wall, as well as embodying the end of the Cold War. Without the symbolic meaning behind the falling of the Berlin Wall, there might still be a looming possibility of nuclear fallout.